Hey guys.
Hey guys, happy St. Patrick's Day.
Today we're going to be talking about travel therapist benefits packages, things about health insurance, dental, vision, 401k plans, what we do between contracts for health insurance coverage and things like that. This is definitely one of the most common questions we get because a lot of people that aren't familiar with travel don't exactly know how the benefits work as far as are we really employees of the company, or are we employees of the facility that we're working at, or how does that work? So something we're going to cover today.
Yep, awesome. So we'll let a few people get joined on with us tonight. For those of you guys that are just getting signed on, say hey below and let us know, what did you guys do for St. Patrick's Day, if anything? I see Lauren is signing on and a couple others. Jared's got his fun St. Patrick's Day hat here that we acquired while we were out and about today because he didn't have his green on. So he's on Blarney Stone Sober right now. The other options are Buzzy, McTipsy, Lit, Shamrocked, and Oh My Head.
I particularly like the Lit one.
Yeah, I don't know that you're quite lit. I think he's more on the Blarney Stone Sober side. So what did you guys do for St. Patrick's Day, if anything? Did y'all go out and about? I see David signing on. Hey David, new grad that's going to be graduating in May. That's awesome. May is coming ever closer. I feel like I've been talking to new grads that have been coming up this May since like at least in the fall, and it's like, oh, I'm graduating this year, and now it's finally almost here. It's like almost time. Thanks Ash, thanks for tuning in. It is a pretty cool hat, and the cool thing was Jared got for free. There was just this whole crew of they were like on a softball team at this pub we stopped by this afternoon in Alexandria, Virginia, and they had all kinds of gear. I got these free stickers, and Jared acquired a hat and some other stuff, so it was pretty fun. I see Jeff is signing on. Jeff will also be graduating soon and just has a couple more weeks left in his final internship before he kind of starts his journey into travel therapy, so welcome. So tonight we're going to be talking about benefits packages as travel PTs or travel therapists in general. So this applies to PTs, OTs, speech therapists, PTAs, and OTAs. So Jared's going to get this shared in a couple groups just so we can have a couple people joining on with us tonight and join the conversation. So if you guys have any specific questions you want to know, just drop them below. And then we're going to kind of go over just the basics of everything, and we'll answer any questions you guys might have. Let's see. Ash says that he had to take care of 3 dogs for his out-of-town friends, and they went on a long hike. Nice.
Yeah, that's nice.
It was a good day here for it. I hope the weather was nice wherever you are. It was a little chilly, but it was sunny. So we got together with some friends today in Alexandria, Virginia for brunch. It was our friend Michelle's birthday, a fellow travel PT actually, so shout out to Michelle. We got together with a few folks, and we'd never really been to downtown Alexandria. It was really pretty.
It's a nice place.
It was kind of historic, and it was really quaint. So it was a nice area, and then after that we went over to a pub and kind of joined up with some people and did the whole Irish thing for a couple hours. So it was a good day. We had fun. So we're just gonna dive right in. If anybody else is just signing on, just say hey below, let us know who you are, where you're coming from, and what brings you to talk about travel therapy tonight. So the burning question is, do travel therapists get benefits? And the answer is yes. You are eligible to get benefits as a traveler, and the way it works is that when you're on a contract, you are an employee of that contract company. So that travel therapy company, you are an employee of theirs. So for example, if I'm working at an outpatient PT clinic right now, I'm not an employee of that outpatient PT clinic. I'm an employee of my contract company where I am there.
Yep. So we are actually, we're W-2 employees. We're not 1099 employees. Some travelers actually do travel as 1099 employees, but there's a little more hassle involved. So you wouldn't actually go through a travel company. You would find your own contracts. Maybe you'd call around in the area you want to go to, find somewhere that needs temporary help, negotiate a pay rate, all that, set up a contract. So you can do it that way and travel as a 1099 employee, but that's not the way we do it. It's more hassle that way. You'd probably make more money, of course, but
you'd often have to pay more on your
benefits
because you're paying for your own insurance. So you get the benefit of being on the group plan, So if anybody is familiar with working with a standard organization, a standard company, when you're on a group plan for insurance, it costs less because the company pays part of your dues or your premiums.
Yeah.
So it's cheaper for you as an employee to be on a group plan with your company.
Yeah, so the health insurance, we're getting the same health insurance offered to the employees of the company as far as like the recruiters and the account managers and payroll people for the company. So we are actually employees of the company, which is nice.
Yeah. So just to kind of talk a little bit further, insurance is the one that most people want to know about. You know, when are you covered? What do you have lapses in your coverage? So in general, you're only covered while you're on contract with your company. So if you start your contract on April the 1st, then you'll, depending on the company, sometimes it starts on day one. Sometimes they have a 30-day waiting period. It's really great if you can find a company that starts day one for you when you get started. And then if you decide to stay with that same company continuously throughout your career as a travel therapist, so you finish that contract on May, June, July 1st, and then you start another one on July 7th with that same company, your insurance would carry over. As long as you don't have a break longer than, it depends on the company, it's usually 2 to 4 weeks between contracts. As long as you pick up a new contract with that same company, you would still be on their insurance.
Yeah, you would still pay your premiums, which for the most part is pretty low. So usually our premiums have been somewhere between about $20 to $40 a week for the health insurance. So in that gap period, say it's 3 weeks, and the company covers you 4 weeks, you would still pay your premium during that time, but you would still stay on their health insurance, which is really nice. So the only issue comes when you switch companies. So, you know, we always tell people to work with more than one company, ideally like 2 or 3. And so if you're working with one and you switch to another one, they won't cover you in the gap between the end of your contract with their company and the beginning of the contract with the next company.
Yeah.
So that's where you have to figure out what you want to do, and some of that comes down to how long the gap's going to be, how many medical issues you have, like what kind of risk you're willing to take.
Yeah, so in the past, for the most part, we have just allowed that lapse if we did switch between companies. For our first 3 years working as travel therapists, we didn't take very much time off. I think the most we ever took off was like
2 weeks.
2 weeks in between. And in that particular case, when we did 2 weeks off, we took our next contract with the same company because we were going on a vacation out of the country at that time. So we really wanted to be covered under insurance. So we made sure to take our next job with a different company. But the times that we have taken it, with the same company, the times that we have taken it with a different company, we just allowed that weekend or that week between to just not be covered, and we were okay with that.
Yep.
But there are certain people that don't like that type of risk, and they would rather maintain their own insurance. So while you might pay more, you wouldn't have to worry as much about lapses in coverage. So there's pros and cons to it.
Yeah.
The other cool thing is you're always eligible for COBRA insurance. So does anybody in the group that's joining us tonight, do y'all know what COBRA is?
Yeah, this applies to people in permanent jobs as well.
Right. So just
COBRA's-
comment below if you do or you don't know what COBRA is. Some people that have had experience, with just regular permanent positions are familiar with COBRA. Some of us that are just coming straight through out of school have no idea what COBRA is. So let us know if you already know what that is or not. But it is cool that you have the opportunity to be covered under COBRA as a travel therapist.
Yeah.
And the thing that I didn't really know about COBRA, we'll talk a little bit more about what it is, but the cool thing is that you can actually do it retroactively, which I didn't know, which is pretty nice. It gives you some peace of mind.
Yeah. So basically, the way COBRA works is the company that you're working with has to offer you that same coverage that you had up to, I'm not exactly sure how long it is. It's a few month period that they have to allow you to have insurance, and you just pay the full premium. So whereas part of that premium was subsidized while you're with the company, now you pay the full premium. And normally, it's obviously gonna be a little higher. It might be $300 a month or something like that, or probably $300 a month, somewhere around there. It depends on the company, but instead of being completely without insurance, you just pay that premium and you can stay on their insurance plan. But yeah, like she was saying, the awesome thing about COBRA is that it's retroactive, meaning that say you had a 4-week gap between contracts and you were taking a contract with a new company when you went back, you could wait until that 4-week period was up. And if you had any medical problems during that time, or you had to go to, say, the emergency room for something, you can sign up for COBRA retroactively, and it will cover you for that gap. But if you never had any problems during that time, then you just never have to sign up. So it's like the best of both worlds, because you kind of have coverage, but at the same time, you don't have to pay for the coverage unless you need it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been our plan. So our gaps were sort of covered because if something happened, we would sign up for COBRA retroactively. But we never have had to because we just, we don't have any medical issues during that time. We don't schedule appointments during that time. And so it hasn't been a big deal.
So basically what COBRA is you become eligible anytime you're terminated or you end working at a facility or a job. So if you just had a normal job and you were fired or you quit and your job was terminated, at the end of that termination of your employment, you would be eligible to sign up for COBRA. This applies to any job anywhere. So as a contractor, when your contract ends, you're technically unemployed now. So that's how you're eligible to do COBRA. So we've kind of always used that, like Jared said, as our backup plan, and we feel pretty comfortable with that. Yep. And we haven't had any issues with it so far. Now coming up soon, because we're going to be taking more time off. Last year when we decided to take 6 months off of work, we went out of the country and we were gone the whole time. So we thought, okay, well, we don't really need U.S. insurance because we're not going to be in the U.S. So we had just travel insurance during that time.
Yeah, which, I mean, we were a little uncomfortable with, and I think most people might not be willing to do something like that. Mm-hmm. But the way I looked at it was, why would I pay $300 or $400 a month for insurance in the U.S. that I'm not going to be able to use at all? Unless something catastrophic happened and I had to be airlifted back to the U.S., then I would need it. But otherwise, you're in different countries that have pretty low medical costs. So we kind of had the traveler's insurance to cover, major things like airlifting and things like that. But as far as like any medical issues we had while we were in the countries, we would just go to clinics there and pay cash.
Yeah. And
it would probably cost us less than the $300 or $400 a month we pay in insurance premiums.
But later,
one thing that we'll probably do from this point on is for those longer gaps. So say like 3 or 4 months, we're going to take off this year from May to September. We can, when you finish employment, that counts as a change in status for being able to sign up for the Affordable Care Act plans. So if you go to like healthcare.gov and sign up for a plan there, basically when you leave an employer, you have a gap in coverage. You're able to go and sign up for one of those plans, and then you're eligible for whatever kind of health insurance you want to choose through the healthcare.gov website. So, and usually those come with subsidies while you're not working, which is pretty nice, depending on your income.
Because otherwise they can be pretty expensive. Going through the marketplace can be pretty expensive to carry your own insurance. But we did the calculations, since for us in the future we're not going to be necessarily working full time, our premiums should be lower.
Yeah.
And that's just because we're planning on working, a few months here and there, and then taking a few months off. So there's a lot of different options, different things to think about. So if you plan on being a year-round traveler, travel therapist, you're just going to have to think about, okay, if you do decide to take a week off here and there, what are you going to do about coverage? Are you going to feel more comfortable with, is it going to sway you towards taking jobs with the same company so that way you don't have to worry about it? Or are you just going to carry your own? Because sometimes the same company, you might really want to switch. You're like, no, this other company has this great job and this one doesn't have it. So you just have to think about those things. Or are you just going to sign up for COBRA in between? And so it might just be a little more paperwork, but it's doable.
And one interesting thing, I wrote a few articles specifically about health insurance for travelers. And so our incomes are so low that normally we qualify for the subsidies. But the problem is, if you're employed when you sign up for the coverage, you can't get the subsidies if you're offered, if you're offered health insurance through the employer. So you could still get the plan itself. So you could sign up through the healthcare.gov website and get a plan. You just wouldn't be eligible for the subsidies if you're offered a plan through your employer and you choose not to take it. So it's an option, but without the subsidies, it's usually a lot more expensive than going through the plan through the workplace. So for us, we would rather go through the workplace plan while we're working. During the gaps, then we can sign up for the Affordable Care Act. We would get the subsidized rate, so it would be a lot cheaper. And then I think that works out best for us for long gaps. For short gaps, we have COBRA to cover. So we feel pretty good about that plan.
Yeah, and Ash had a question about getting short-term health insurance, like a catastrophic plan between contracts. Are you familiar with that?
So the catastrophic plans, until this year, I don't think that they qualified under the Affordable Care Act, so you'd still have to pay a penalty in the past. So I think if you signed up for those, it wouldn't cover you, but that penalty doesn't exist as of 2019. So yeah, I think if you can get a plan cheap enough, then I think the catastrophic plans are really good for people that are young and healthy, and you don't go to the emergency room or urgent care often or anything like that. and you just have that as a backup plan basically. So yeah, I think that starting in 2019, that is a pretty good plan. But before then, if you had a catastrophic coverage plan, you'd have to pay the penalty, which was a pretty big downside.
Okay, and then we had another thing. Jeff says, I believe that some companies go until the end of the month. So if your contract ends the first week, I think you're still covered the last 3 weeks. Yeah, I have heard some companies that say that. Each company is a little different. So, you know, when you guys are starting to choose which travel companies you want to work with, you want to ask some of these questions. We've written a couple articles about questions to ask a travel company. You do want to find out specifics about their benefits. It's good if you can do some reading up to think of, you know, what questions you need to ask them. That would be a really important thing. One thing we always talk about is, you know, whether or not their insurance starts on day 1 or it starts on day 30, or there's one company that we like that they start on the first of the month. So it doesn't matter when you start working, their benefits start on the first of the month. So if your contract starts on the second day of the month, then you pretty much have to wait a whole month.
Yeah.
It just depends on your contract starts.
And one thing to see about that, Jeff, is that going to the end of the month, just make sure that still applies if you're switching companies.
Yeah.
So if you left that company, would they still cover you till the end of the month? You know, even if you're going to a new company, because it might be one of those things where they cover you to the end of the month, as long as you take another contract with them before the end of that month, or even after that month. But you know, they would stop the coverage at the end of the month prior. Does that make sense? So just make sure that that's the case, and it actually applies if you're switching companies, because a lot of companies, you know, if you're going to switch to someone else, they don't really help you out much, which is kind of a disadvantage.
Yeah. Okay, Jill wants to know, do we have a benefits comparison document for major companies? No, that's not something we've written up before. I sort of have my own personal list of the ones that we work with. Like, I've just jotted down some notes from my phone calls with them. So if you want to reach out and ask, you know, I have some bullet points just on the ones that we work with. But there's so many different companies out there. I mean, there's hundreds, and they're all slightly different. So of the, you know, 6 or 7 or so that I'm really familiar with, yeah, I kind of have an idea of what theirs are like. But each company is a little bit different. So I can message you about the ones that I know of.
Yeah.
But yeah, your recruiter is going to be your best bet there. So they'll know the most, and they can usually send you some, you know, they'll send you like the big PDF about their benefits, but they could hopefully send you at least just like a bulleted list of like those key points of like when it starts and when it covers you and that sort of thing.
Yep. So then dental and vision. Most companies offer dental and vision while you're on contract with them. One thing that we think is an advantage of being a traveler, or at least I think so. Whitney probably doesn't care. But while we're on contract, so say we only work 3 months a year, we only pay premiums for that 3 months. So if we use our benefits during that 3 months, it's basically like we used a year's worth of benefits. So for things like contact lens checks and using the what do they give you, like an allowance or something for contacts or glasses each year. So say we work 3 months, we only pay 3 months worth of premiums, but we get the full year worth of benefit.
Because you would only go to once to the optometrist. So what he's saying basically is, like, normally the premiums are based on 365 days. You're going to pay this amount weekly for 52 weeks to meet the premium benefit to get your one optometrist visit that allots for your one contact lens fitting or your one glasses fitting.
And the same thing with the dentist. Like, you go there, you might do 2 cleanings a year, or 1 cleaning a year, depending. But but yeah, if you did 1 cleaning a year and you got, say, a cavity filled or something, you're only going to do that one time a year. So you get the other 9 months of the year relatively free. I mean, if you don't have any other issues.
Yeah. So what we've done sometimes is only for like our first 3 months signed up for the vision, and then if say we switched contracts or didn't take a next contract with that company or whatever, don't sign up for the vision after that, because we already got our optometrist appointment out of the way. And you can do the same thing with dental. I mean, of course, you might want to have it again later in the year. Yeah. But that's just some little way you can, like, game the system. And it's not a huge difference.
So like the vision benefit, I think, is usually about $1 or maybe $2 a week.
It's super cheap.
$100 a year. It's not big. And then dental might be $3 or $4 a week. So same thing, not a huge difference, but yeah, those benefits are also offered. Yeah,
and you can always just like pick and choose. And so some people will actually ask, like, well, do I have to take the benefits? No, you don't have to take the benefits. So like when I first got out of school, I was still, you're under like 26, I think. Some of you younger guys might know that date. But I was 25 when I graduated, so I was still on my mom's insurance for the first little bit. So for my first contract or 2 or 3, I didn't take the insurance at all. And then certain people, like they'll have a spouse that has their insurance covered or whatever, so you don't have to take the company benefits. A question that came up last week on one of our videos is, if you don't take the benefits, will they pay you more money? Because, you know, say if I need the benefits but he doesn't, should my pay be higher for the same job? It's a little bit of a gray area.
Yeah, theoretically, yes, because the company's paying less out for you, so they'd be able to give you more money. But it does seem to be a gray area as far as the legality of you declining benefits and getting more pay. I've read a couple different sources that go either way. Like one will say, yeah, it's fine. One will say, no, you can't do that. But we do know that companies do it. So some companies are willing to say, okay, you'll make this much if you take benefits, you'll make this much if you don't. Other companies are like, you make this much, take the benefits or leave it, you still make this much.
Yeah.
So each company does that differently.
One more note about insurance. So some people will ask us, like, are the coverages pretty good with the companies? We've seen some pretty good ones. So I don't know if it's different depending on where you're from or whatnot, but Blue Cross Blue Shield is like a pretty major one where we're from. And a lot of the companies we've worked for have provided Blue Cross Blue Shield. Some other companies have provided United Healthcare. So it just depends on the company, but we've seen some pretty good ones. And then they'll usually give a few different like tiers of premiums, and that depends on how high your deductible is going to be versus how high your premium is, which is pretty standard across other companies as well. So
yeah,
they're usually pretty comparable.
And usually each company will have at least one plan that's eligible for a health savings account, which is a big thing for me and Whitney. We both would rather have a high deductible plan that we're probably not ever going to use, hopefully, and then try to max out a health savings account or put as much in there as we can while we're with the company. Yeah. So we always choose the lowest tier plan. It's the cheapest, eligible for the health savings account, and we try to put as much in there as we're able to.
Okay, so that's pretty much it on insurance. If you guys have any other questions about insurance, will you just comment below and ask us? We're going to move on and talk about some other benefits. I also see we have a few new people that have signed on. So if you guys just want to say hey below, drop us a comment, give us a like, just let us know who you are and why you're here. We'd appreciate it. Let's see, Jill has another question for us. Jill says, do you have to use that coverage in network typically, or could you use providers in your tax home?
So every company we've ever worked with, the options that they have are pretty much nationally available. So they'll have a website where you go on there and you put in the zip code that you're at, and it shows you in-network providers in your area. So that's what we've always done. And we've never had any trouble finding like in-network providers wherever we're at, either at our tax home or at our travel location. We can pretty much find people, and that applies for physicians as well as dentists and optometrists. So just go online and put in the zip code and find in-network providers there.
Yeah. Benny wants to know, if you get health insurance from a spouse's job, can you forego that part of the benefits package?
Yeah, you definitely can. But like we were saying, it just depends on the company whether or not that will actually translate into increased weekly pay for you.
Yeah.
Some companies it will, some companies it won't. And some companies, the increased pay can be significant, and some it's maybe like an extra $20 a week or something, which is not huge. But
so yeah, you can definitely skip the health insurance.
Yeah.
I never thought about it this way, but could you skip the health insurance but still do the 401k and the other benefits?
Yeah. So everything's opt-in. And you can even, you can opt into the health insurance and not the dental or vision. You can opt into the dental and vision, not the health insurance. All the benefits, at least the companies that we've used, have been, each one is separate.
Cool. Okay, so moving on from health insurance, life insurance is another one we wanted to talk about. So most of the ones that we've joined up with have some sort of standard, at least base amount of life insurance. So that's a good option just to throw in there. Some people still feel comfortable with carrying their own life insurance policies as well.
Yeah, so the life insurance that they offer is usually very low. And it might be like $20,000 or $50,000, just a small amount, which would cover like basically funeral expenses, which is all we need. That's, we don't have kids. That's perfect for us. It's free. It's offered through the company, so we go with that. There's a lot of companies that also offer a higher amount of life insurance for an additional cost. We've never done that. If we were going to get additional life insurance, so say we had kids that, we wanted to make sure that one of us passed away, that we would leave, I don't know, a couple $100,000 or something like that, we would probably get it through an outside provider so that we didn't have it linked to our employer at all, especially since we don't work all year, we switch jobs pretty often. I would rather have that separate. So if it's a free benefit, always take it. So we're always covered by like that small insurance policy through the company. But yeah, if we were going to get a bigger policy, we would go outside of the companies.
Okay. And how does that work with the life insurance? Is that only while you're on contract?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, only while you're on contract.
Okay. So yeah, that one's kind of like, okay, well, if you die while you're on this contract, then you're covered. But I mean, otherwise it's like, not that important. But it's a free option. It's usually just like this is already included type of thing. So just a peace of mind thing. So another big one is that people have asked about is disability insurance, and if that is provided. So that's typically one that's kind of not all companies provide that.
Some do, some don't. Disability coverage is always going to be a little more expensive than something like life insurance, because you have to remember with any insurance, the cost is related pretty much exactly to the proportion that you'll have to use it, and the expected value or the expected cost to the company if you have to use it. So for instance, if something like long-term disability or long-term care insurance, you know, there's a pretty high likelihood that someone's going to have to use that at some point in their life, so it's more expensive. Whereas life insurance, these term policies that only go for like 20 years, for a young person, the chances of you dying is pretty low. That's why the cost is so low, even with a high benefit. So yeah, short-term disability policies, there's a little higher likelihood that you might have to use that, which means that they charge a little bit more for it.
And something to note on the disability, so some people get concerned about, you know, will there be disability options? As a travel healthcare provider, because part of your pay is taxed and part of it's not, your disability insurance, any benefit they provide is going to be based on only your hourly taxable income. They can't base your disability insurance on, nice hat. They can't base your disability insurance on your whole pay. They can't base it on your stipend. So it might not even really be worth it, because you're not, like, if you go on disability, they're only going to pay you a percentage based on your hourly, which is only, you know, whatever it might be.
It would usually be 75% of your hourly pay, which would, for a lot of travelers, be somewhere around $20 an hour, which means you might be getting $15 an hour. So, I mean, yeah, that's better than nothing, but it might not be worth whatever the premium is. So you would just have to compare. Like, if it's $100 a week, no, that's probably not worth it, because the benefit, the payout's going to be pretty low. If it's something, you know, $10 a week, maybe that's worth it to you, but it just depends.
Right.
You never know when you need something like that is the thing. You know, we've of course never needed that, and a lot of people will go through their whole life without ever needing it, but sometimes you do.
So in that regard, we typically say it's just best to have your own savings. You want to have, you know, a good amount of savings on your own in case something bad happens. It's good to have your own investments and kind of, you know, diversify your accounts, have some savings accounts that you can access if that were to happen to you. And not rely as much on the company's disability.
Yep.
So something else we want to talk about is, do companies provide PTO and sick time? So this is something that's not typically provided as a travel healthcare professional. So whereas, you know, some companies, if you're a permanent employee, they will provide PTO or sick time. It's just different as a traveler, because you're a contract employee. So you're only employed while you're there on contract. They don't allow you to have days off for sick time. Now, if you're sick and you have to call in sick, you're just gonna have to miss the day. You're just not gonna get paid for that day. There are a couple companies.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it.
Ryan's giving him a hard time about his St. Patrick's Day. Ryan just got on, and so some of you guys may have also just got on, so you missed the front of Jared's hat, which is his St. Patrick's Day hat he picked up today. It's a scale of how drunk you are. He put it on the lit one, but he's actually on the Blarney Stone sober one. Yeah. Be honest.
So, see, Ryan, I bet you're jealous now. So.
A guy tried to steal it from him at the pub for sure. So anyway, what I was saying is about the PTO, there's one company that I do know of that offers you a PTO benefit as a traveler. So it's based on the number of hours you work with them in a contract. You can accrue up to, I think it's like 8 hours per contract, something along those lines.
Yeah, basically 1 day off per contract.
Yeah, so you could earn 1 day off per contract. But for the most part, for things like PTO and sick time, we again promote that you just maintain your own savings account and, you know, have money to cover yourself for those situations, because you're already making quite a bit more as a travel therapist. You just need to allocate that money wisely and, you know, account for days that you might be sick or taking days off that you might need for appointments and that sort of thing, because you don't have PTO.
That's one of the things we talked about with that intangible benefit video last week. All those intangible benefits, they come out of your pay one way or another. So you might get paid for vacation time with certain companies, but you have to realize that your pay is going to be a little lower per week to account for that, right? So we would rather save our own money and have our own funds for when we want to take time off than rely on the company to give us PTO, because that's just like another step you have to go through to get the money, right? So we'd rather get the money up front, save it ourselves, instead of have the company basically save it for us and call it a PTO.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, you always just have to be vigilant and question where any of these benefits come from. So yeah, just don't, as a traveler, don't expect going into it that you have PTO. But don't worry, because you're still getting benefits other ways. You're getting higher pay in other regards. So don't be deterred by that. It's not a big deal.
Definitely.
Okay, the last thing we want to talk about is 401k. So 401k is typically provided by travel companies, not all of them though, but most of them do have some type of 401k benefit. You do need to ask questions about when am I eligible to start contributing and when am I eligible to start receiving a match. So some companies will have a waiting period where you need to work with them for a full contract or a full 2 contracts before you can start paying into it. Some of them will let you start paying into your 401k right away. So it'll start coming off your paychecks right away. You'll set up your online account. You'll say, I want to allocate, this percentage of my taxable pay to be set aside into my 401k account. And then some of them, they'll immediately start matching you. But what you need to think about is some of the companies have these hidden rules. It's called a vesting schedule.
Well, all companies pretty much have a vesting schedule.
Yeah.
It just depends on what the vesting schedule is.
So vesting means when you're fully vested or not, or only partially vested, is whether or not you actually get to keep the match that they give you. So they'll kind of claim like, oh yeah, we match this percent based on this amount. But if you don't work with us for a whole year or a whole 2 years or a whole 3 years worth of contracts, then we're going to take it back. So it's like you never got the match at all.
Yeah, but what you contribute is always your money. So whatever you contribute is you always get to keep. So it's just the match, which as a traveler is usually not a big deal anyway, because it's only, like Whitney said, it's only based on our taxable pay. So you're getting matched on what you put in based on your taxable pay. And so that's actually a pretty good point that I wasn't thinking about mentioning, but so since it's based on your taxable pay, this is even harder for PTAs or COTAs that might have a lower taxable rate. You can only usually put in 75% of your taxable pay into your 401k. So if you're trying to max out your 401k in a year, it can take you quite a while. So 75% of $20 an hour is not that much to try to get to $19,000, which is the maximum this year. So we have always pretty much tried to max it out as quickly as we can in the beginning of the year. So we allocate 75% of our taxable income straight to the 401k account and try to get to the max as quickly as we can. But that's something to consider. Like 75% of $20 an hour might take you 7 months to get to the max if you're trying to max out your tax advantage accounts.
Yeah, so you got to think ahead on if you plan to max it out. Some people aren't thinking at all about maxing it out. They're like, you know what, I'm just going to put a small amount in here just to get me started, but the majority of my money is going towards my debt or whatever it might be. So just think about it. Think about your long-term plan, or think about, like, say for us, we're only going to be working a few months this year. So if we were working with a company right now, which we're actually not working with one of the companies that we do 401k with, but in the past, like last year when we worked 6 months, we were like, oh, we only have 6 months to max out our 401k. So we got to put as much money in it right now as we can, because we're not going to be able to do it later in the year. So you just have to think about the long game there. So yeah, think about the 401k, ask the recruiters about their benefits packages and whether they provide it. And if they do provide a match, ask them, or either ask their benefits department what the vesting schedule is like, so that you at least know, okay, the match matters for me or it doesn't matter for me, because I know I'm not going to be a traveler for 3 whole years full-time with this company. Which we actually did. We worked full-time for the most part with the same company, almost all of our contracts for 3 years, so we did finally get our match at 100%.
Yeah,
So,
one thing to consider too is what do they count as a year? Because some companies will count, say, 1,000 hours worked in a calendar year as a year of work, which is only 2 contracts. So if you worked with that company 2 contracts, say in 2016, and then you worked 2 contracts with a different company, and then 2 contracts with them in 2017, 2 contracts in 2018, that would still count as 3 years towards the vesting. So you'd be fully vested in their 401k plan, even though you didn't continuously work with them. So there's a lot of things that if you're really interested in the match, that's really important to you, that you should clarify with the company and the recruiter.
yeah. So one other thing in regards to 401k we want to talk about is if you leave that company and you switch to a different company, what happens to that 401k? What happens to that account? So you can leave it in that account, or you can choose to roll it over into a different account that's not associated with that company. So you want to explain a little bit about how the rollover works, because I don't understand it as well as he does.
Yeah, I pretty much recommend that if you're leaving a company and you have a 401k balance there, you probably should roll it over into a traditional IRA. And the reason for that is in a traditional IRA, you have more options and you can usually pick funds with lower fees. So in a 401k, you're limited by whatever fees they or whatever funds they offer, and there might be like 20 options. Some are good, some are terrible. Sometimes all of them are terrible. It just depends on the company and what funds they offer. But when you leave, roll it over into a traditional IRA and do whatever you want with it. And that way, say you worked with one company for 4 contracts, then you went to a different company, had a different 401k, different company, did that for 5 years. You have 5 different 401ks. That's a lot to keep a handle on and to keep track of. So instead, roll all of those into one traditional IRA account, and then you have all your funds in one place, and you can allocate it however you want.
Yep.
So it's not a hard process. I've rolled some 401ks into IRAs before. It's not a big deal at all.
And somebody's asked before, like, should I roll my old company's 401k into my current company's 401k? But we wouldn't recommend doing that because, again, you might just move on from that company quickly as well. So it's better just to have it in a different account that's in your name, that's not associated with the company anymore.
And it also depends on what funds are in that new account. Maybe there's like some funds that you can't even get through a regular IRA. Like sometimes these funds in the 401k will offer institutional share classes, which are even better than what you can get as a regular investor. So in that case, maybe it makes sense to roll the money into the new company. But there's a lot of variables there. And for the most part, the easiest way to do it is to roll it into a traditional IRA each time you leave a company, each time you have a 401k balance, and then you have all your funds in one place that you can do whatever you want with.
Yep. And so for the more advanced investors out there, we also had somebody ask a question once that was like, okay, if I plan this year to roll my 401k into my IRA, does that limit me from contributing to my full IRA amount that year?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, some of this stuff is complicated and it's kind of a pain. But yeah, so a rollover into a traditional IRA does not count as a contribution.
Right.
So you say I had $70,000 in a 401k account and I rolled that into a traditional IRA. I can still contribute the maximum that same year to that same traditional IRA, and the maximum this year is $6,000. So that year, basically, I'd roll $70,000 from the 401k, and then an additional $6,000 of my own money into that traditional IRA. So I'd have $76,000,
Yep.
and so it doesn't count towards that max
Yep.
at all.
So that's for the advanced class. So if you guys have more questions, please message Jared about how all that stuff works, or talk to your financial advisor.
Yep.
So we're gonna wrap up pretty soon. Do you guys have more questions about benefits? Please just leave us a comment below and we'll answer what we can. If you guys have gotten benefit out of this video, we would appreciate it if you would just hit the like button, hit the share button, leave us a comment, leave us an emoji, give us something. That way we can share the video, get it out there, and have more people join on with us.
Yeah, so Ash says savings account tip. He listed a couple savings accounts that offer over 2% interest, which is very good right now. So if you can Google around online and find some savings accounts right now that are in like the 2.25% range. I think some even might go as 2.5% now. But there's some good savings account options now. The rates are finally going up a little bit. So yeah, I think everyone should have an emergency fund, and probably a good place to have that is in a high yield savings account. So that's a good option. Ryan said the first legitimate question he has ever
Ryan,
asked.
are you sick? You asked a real question. I don't understand.
What's the cutoff date to contribute to your previous year IRA? The cutoff date is basically when you file your taxes for that prior year. So if you waited till April 15th or whatever, I mean, you could wait and contribute all the way up till that date when you file your taxes.
Yep, so it's not too late. If you haven't filed your taxes for last year, it's not too late to contribute to last year's IRAs. But this has nothing to do with company benefits, because IRAs is an individual retirement account, but we're just talking about other investing options.
All right, IRA, go with Vanguard whenever possible. They help a lot with rollover. Expense ratios are the lowest in the industry. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Vanguard too. I think I have almost all my investments at Vanguard, so I would definitely agree with that. There's some other good ones too. Fidelity, I think, is pretty decent, especially now that they introduced the 0% expense ratio funds. Schwab seems to have some pretty good index funds, but in general, I think Vanguard is a pretty good option.
Yep. So anybody have any other questions about travel company benefits, let us know, leave us a comment. Just to kind of review, yes, you are eligible to receive benefits as a travel therapist when you're working with a travel therapy company. So any of the big major traditional companies are going to offer benefits to you while you're an employee of theirs, while you're on contract. It does get a little bit tricky with insurance, so sometimes you have to find out what you're going to do between contracts if you don't plan to stay with the same company. Some people feel more comfortable maintaining their own insurance through the marketplace. So you just have to think about some of those things. But if you guys have more specific questions and you want to just shoot us a message, we'd be happy to help you out. If you guys want to know If you guys want to know like which companies we work with and which ones, benefits packages we like, you can send us a message, or you could comment below and just say recruiter, and we'll send you some information on the recruiters and the companies that we like, and the ones that we've found to have pretty good benefits.
Yep.
So awesome. Thank you guys for joining in. And Ryan, we're not going to disclose that information. So yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. We'll be back next Sunday, I think.
Yeah, we're actually, next week we're going to, what is it? The
Is it next
conclave?
week? I was about to say. Yeah, so next week, for anybody who's in North Carolina, any students out there, we're actually going to be at the North Carolina Student Conclave at Elon University next Saturday. We're going to be having a booth set up there and chatting with students that are interested in getting into travel therapy, and we're actually going to join in their networking event too to teach them, kind of some information about travel therapy. So if any North Carolina PT students or PTA students are tuning in, we'll see you next week. But yeah, next Sunday we'll get back on for a video. I don't know what topic yet, but
If you guys have any ideas about topics, let us know.
Yep, so to be determined. We'll announce it later. So thank you guys for joining on, and y'all have a good night and a happy St. Patty's Day.
See you
Hopefully
later.
you're not out having too much fun tonight. Maybe you'll be on this oh my head level tomorrow, Monday morning.
All right, see you guys.
Bye guys.